We will start off with Joe DELANEY. Joe DELANEY lives in the area next to to the Grenfell Tower. He's been a very vocal activist and campaigner for the families, the residents, the victims, and I think he will give us a very good insight into what happened on the night of the 14th of June, what events preceded this disaster, and also what can be done on the ground now and what kind of justice people are seeking, those affected on the ground.
Well, thanks to everyone for coming. Thanks to you guys for organising this. Yeah, and thanks for listening for a start, because it seems that those in central government still seem unwilling or unable to do so, quite sadly. The Grenfell Tower was certainly an avoidable disaster. It was certainly a predicted disaster. All you have to do is visit grenfellactiongroup.wordpress.com and you will see the tireless recording of the way that the council have behaved throughout this appalling tragedy and before this tragedy by the tireless editor there, Francis O'Connor, who is based in Ireland. Francis left the tower in 2013 and moved back to Ireland. However, he is still, as he said to me more often than not, he's kept his heart in the tower block and his heart in the area. And I'm certainly very glad that he did, because without him we wouldn't have such a valuable resource that we can call upon to prove the hubris and greed that led to this decision. I noticed that tonight's talk, it was called the Avoidable tragedy. But the main thing to consider is that it's not just avoidable, it's ongoing. You know, I was dealing with issues this morning from residents of the tower who still are being messed around by the council in terms of this £5,000 that's been promised to each of them. I've been dealing with issues concerning housing for many of them, because the offers that they're being made by the council are frankly a joke. You know, so a family that was already in an overcrowded one-bedroom property are being told, well, we're offering you a one-bedroom, so you're getting like for like, you know, and then they can at least say, well, that box is ticked, you know, and therefore Miss Strong and Stable's promise has been kept. I don't like to make this issue political, because frankly I think Labour have just as much blood on their hands when it comes to this matter as the Tories do. You only have to look at the actions of the Labour Council, say in Lambeth, and see how they've treated residents there when it's come to regenerations. You know, residents on the Haygate estate have been treated just as badly. Thankfully no one died there, but it's the same principle. You know, the land you are on is worth more than the people who are on this land, and we will take it from you by whatever means we can. And even those who supposedly bought their properties are made absolute jokes of offers when it comes to the compensation that they receive when their properties are compulsorily purchased. So they don't even have a chance of buying somewhere else within the community that they've probably grown up in, you know, and have all of their links in. And I don't think that's right, and I'm sure many here don't either. In fact, I don't think anyone right-thinking would say that that's sort of an acceptable or proper way for any government to treat any of its citizens. The consultation and planning that went into Grenfell Tower's regeneration, and I hate using that word because frankly the only regenerations I've ever liked are the ones of Doctor Who. Even the latest one, I have to say, despite the storm on Twitter about it. It was an absolute joke. Various people raised several points about the fact that there wouldn't be access to fire vehicles and things like that, and they were dismissed by Jonathan Ball, who was still the head of planning at RBKC to this day. I raised a point with him about the academy, and I said, well, it looks like we're going to lose our footpath that's one side of it. Can you give us a guarantee that that won't happen and that you will refuse any retrospective planning applications that the Kensington Aldridge Academy may make? And he said at the time that he was unable to do so. Now, of course, we know the reason that he was unable to do so, but it was because he didn't want to. And he knew damn well that those retrospective planning applications were going to come in, because they already knew what they planned for it, because K&C actually went to great lengths to actually have a right-of-way in that area moved. And anyone who knows about these things will know that, you know, it's easier to get Stonehenge moved than it is to get a right-of-way moved in this country, as the Ramblers Association so often used to their advantage. The procurement for the block as well. Even if these people are claiming to follow the letter of the law, one thing that I found disturbing was the fact that even though this was an official, the official journal of the European Union procurement process, That's a hell of a mouthful, isn't it? The OJEU, you can look at the documents on the EU website. Just Google OJEU procurement Grenfell Tower. And you will see there that there were certain things that were promised in this tower that just weren't delivered, including the type of cladding that was used. You know, for a council that claims that it's followed the letter of the law, I find it very surprising that all it took was one email from the deputy head of the council at the time, Councillor Rockfield in Mellon, in order to get the cladding changed, because he wanted to save 200 and something thousand pounds, because he felt it was running over budget. Councillor Rockfield in Mellon, by the way, is a councillor who is currently working to give away North Kensington Library to a local private school, the Notting Hill Prep. I'm sure it's a complete coincidence that his children are down on the waiting list for the said school. You know, I certainly wouldn't want to be accused of slander. As I've said as well, preventable and ongoing. You know, the housing offers that have been made for tenants, as I've said, have been an absolute joke. And they are just being made at the moment so that Theresa May can say that her promise has been kept. I find it ironic that Theresa May is willing to spend £1 billion to stay in her own home, and yet a few £100,000 couldn't be spent for us to stay in ours. You know, I live in one of the 3 blocks that's attached to the tower. There are 3 of them, Hurstway, Testerton and Barrington. And I live in the Barrington block, which happens to be on the side where the one road access was. And the fire started that night at about 12:55 a.m. And I was out witnessing this from about, I don't know, it was about 1:05 or 1:06 in the morning. And I hate to say, but it was by 1:30 in the morning I knew for a fact that people were going to die. And I knew that lots of people were going to die. And so what I did at that point was I used my skills from my job, because you see, I'm not an illegal immigrant. I didn't come into this country on a floating door, which is what the Daily Mail will have you believe everyone on this estate did. I was head of insurance and risk at Brent Council for several years, and I still work in the insurance and risk management field. And so at that point I was thinking, what would be the worst evidence that they could face if this thing actually, if I'm actually proven right and people die in that block? And so whilst other people were pointing their cameras at the tower in sheer horror, I was pointing mine at the road and showing the catastrophe that was down there, where my neighbours of mine had to go out and do 3-point turns in their cars to try and get them out of the way, in the hope that they'd be able to make space for the fire vehicles to come through. You know, sadly that didn't prove to be the case, and they were still only able to get 1 or 2 there. When it comes to the fire issue as well, I've heard a lot of criticism for the firemen. And I totally disagree with that. When the firemen were able to get access to that building that night, I saw chaps running in without helmets on or without breathing equipment on. They were that desperate to get in there and do something. You know, there's been talk about the fact that they didn't have equipment that was able to reach high enough. Well, I doubt, you know, your average fireman is the person who's in charge of procurement of such things, you know, so who does that go back to? Again, it goes back to Boris Get Stuffed Johnson. And get stuffed was the phrase he actually used with someone when they were raising concerns about fire station closures and cutbacks to the fire service that were being made in London. You see, and it's that hubris that's continued throughout this process. And what really gets my goat is that central and local government are still trying to deal with a PR catastrophe at the moment. That's the way they're looking at it. Even Gold Command, this supposed shiny organisation that's been brought in, you'll notice, to advise Kensington and Chelsea Council. Darlington Council screw up a few things instantly in special measures, you know, and a commissioner is brought in who can actually say this will happen. Oh, the richest flagship Tory council in the country has issues. Oh no, we'll just send in an advisory body. You know, and frankly, Gold Command have been proven completely useless. And the way things are going, I soon expect them to be placed with Platinum Command or some other stupid name for an organisation that will be just as weak and ineffective. The housing issue for the Tower residents isn't just the only housing issue that's ongoing.
So sorry about this disruption. I hope that we can continue tonight's debate now without any further interruptions. Joe unfortunately had to leave us because he has another engagement tonight. He's speaking at another event. So unfortunately, we couldn't conclude with his final summary, but if anybody has questions or would like to raise something pertaining to Joe's debate or his talk, then please let us know, and I'm happy to direct those questions to him directly.